Hello, my cookies. Welcome to Russell Cooks. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today, we're going to be doing a corn risotto, a smoky salmon with a fresh tomato relish. When I worked in a restaurant, we did something similar with blue fish. We always served it with this fantastic corn risotto and a really quick, fresh tomato relish. Really stuck with me. I love this dish. I'm going to be changing it up a little bit, make it a little easier for the home cook. Also going to be using salmon instead of bluefish because bluefish can be a little hard to find. Let's gather our ingredients. We're going to need corn. It is not corn season right now. So I'm going to say 6 to 8 pieces of corn here. Maybe less if you're in corn season and they're a little bit bigger. These are kind of small. You're also going to need some salmon. You're going to need some arborio rice. You need a little bit of chicken broth, not much. We're going to be using a lot of hot water here. I'm going to be using some smoked sea salt. This is absolutely optional. Regular salt is fine. A little bit of honey. You need some fresh tomatoes, plum tomatoes, cherry tomatoes. Those are available all year round. But if you get a really, really nice heirloom tomato or whatnot, that can work as well. You're going to need some butter. You're going to need some basil. You need a little bit of Parmesan cheese here. You need some garlic. You're going to need some shallots. You're going to need a little bit of balsamic vinegar here. You're also going to need salt and pepper as usual. And then depending on how you want to start the risotto, either your favorite oil, olive oil, vegetable oil, or butter. I'm going to be using butter. Now that we've gathered our ingredients, let's get cooking. I'm going to start with the tomato relish. I'm just going to cut up the tomatoes, toss them with a little salt. I'm going to let them drain, and they're just going to drain for the amount of time that I cook the risotto and fish. I'm going to have them maybe cut each side into 1/6. A little smaller, maybe 9ths. This is going to make a lot of relish. Maybe you don't need to make as many here. This is about a pound of tomatoes. We're also going to add 1 shallot. I'm going to halve it and slice it thin. Cut as thin as you can. Just toss it in there. Now I'm going to add about a teaspoon of salt. It's a pretty hefty amount, but remember, a lot of this will drain away. I'm going to toss it around. I'm going to let it sit, and then I'll drain it through a fine mesh strainer. After a little bit, add our balsamic. Let's add a little garlic now rather than later. Just a teeny bit, small clove, mince it up nice. It's going to be pretty potent here. All right, toss that around, let it sit. Let's go over to our salmon, prep that. So I got my beautiful piece of salmon. I've trimmed off this little bit. I've got my smoked sea salt. So I'm just going to kind of crack this over top, and I'm just going to let it sit. These are big pieces. Can add a nice little smokiness as well as season our salmon. And once it's sat for a little bit, I am going to pat it dry, get a little honey on it. And we're essentially going to broil it. This is hands off. If you like the crispy skin and you want to cook it on a skillet, you can do that. That's fine. Oven, also easy, also great. Okay, let's get working on our risotto. For this risotto, you're gonna need about 1 shallot, mince it up, and I'm using 2 relatively small garlic cloves, and I'm also gonna mince up. I'm just trimming the top and bottom off the corn here. If they are really long, these are not. You can always cut them in half and get the kernels off that way. Otherwise, I just like to run my knife down. Get them all. You can do it in a bowl, whatever you want. Try and get as close to the cob without getting the cob itself. Don't throw this away, all right? Please, I'm gonna milk it. Milk it for all it's worth. Now it's time to milk this corn. Now what we mean by that is you take the back of your knife and you take one of these cobs and you just scrape out all that corny goodness. It kind of looks like milk, so that's why they say it. You won't get a ton, especially if you cut close to the cob, but you will get enough. And this is where a lot of that corn flavor will come from. I'm still gonna save these because I'm gonna add them to the risotto itself and remove it, and that will help give me a little bit more corn flavor as well, rather than making a corn stock. Let's get this on a plate. Look at all that flavor we would have missed otherwise. See how it's kind of milky? We are good to go. We are going to start our risotto now. Let's head over to the stove. I'm gonna melt 2 tablespoons of butter on medium heat. I got a big Dutch oven going on here. Once it's melted, shallots, garlic go in, and then the rice. This is just how risotto's done. We have melted butter. Here's our shallot and our garlic here. I'm just gonna cook it for about a minute. I'm also gonna add a hefty amount of salt here. Let's do 1.5 teaspoons. Ooh, it smells so good here. All right, get ready with the rice. 1.5 cups arborio rice. All right, coat it in the butter. Stir it. You're gonna wanna cook them and toast them. It's gonna take a couple minutes. If you need to drop your heat to medium low, you can, especially if you have a big Dutch oven. The other thing I have is I have 1.5 cups of chicken stock. You preferably want that heated. 180 degrees is fine, doesn't necessarily need to be boiling. And I'm gonna have 3 cups of close to boiling water. Almost there, 2 to 3 minutes, I'd say. We're right there. I'm gonna be adding my 1.5 cups of chicken stock. Veg broth is fine, or even just hot water. And now 3 cups hot water for a total of 4.5 cups of liquid. Just gonna give this a stir. I'm also gonna add about 1/3 of my corn here. Just eyeball it, it's fine. And I'm gonna put my leftover cobs in. I'm gonna take them out later. Now you want to simmer this, I would say probably about 20 minutes. You wanna stir it at least twice during this. But once it comes up to a simmer, cover it, lower the heat as low as you can, stir it twice over 20 minutes. All right, we got a little bit of a simmer here, dropping the heat, covering it. Next up is my salmon. We got our smoky salt on it, just rubbing it around. Now I'm gonna take some honey, maybe a tablespoon, just gonna run it on top. Now this is gonna run off and it's gonna burn. That's what honey does, but it's not gonna burn necessarily on the salmon. Hopefully we get a little bit of nice browning here. About a tablespoon of honey. Gonna rub it on. I'm gonna put it in my toaster oven until it's cooked completely through and we have some color on top. So bake it 450 degrees for about 5 minutes and then broil it for 8 to 10 minutes to get the color and have it be cooked through. Finish our tomato basil relish here. We have our tomatoes, shallots, and a little bit of garlic and salt in here. You can see how liquidy it is. We're gonna get rid of that liquid. We don't need it. Yes, it has a bunch of tomato flavor, but we don't need it sogging out our plate. I'm just gonna strain it in a fine mesh strainer. All right, I strained it out. I lost about a 1/2 cup liquid, but that's fine. Now it's time for our balsamic. Do this to taste. Could be a teaspoon, could be a tablespoon. I'm gonna err on the side of a lot. I'm probably gonna do 2 teaspoons or up to a tablespoon here. I'll do a tablespoon. This is not a balsamic dish. Give it a little bit of a stir. So now that we have our tomato here, let's add basil. Say 2 tablespoons. Doesn't need to be a lot. Almost at 6 minutes with the broil, and I'm not seeing any browning. So I think we're gonna hit the fish just right in terms of temperature when we start seeing some color. And if you don't have a broiler and you don't wanna do it, just roast it at 450 degrees until it's done, or 500 degrees, however hot your oven goes. As high on the rack as possible just to get some browning on the top. I don't know how long that's gonna take. Depends on how thick it is, depends on how cold the salmon is. Could be 10 minutes, could be 20 minutes. Look at this color. This is phenomenal. All right, it has been about 15 minutes. I'm now gonna remove the cobs. You have served your purpose very well. Thank you for your service. And I'm gonna add the second third of my corn right now. I'm gonna stir it for about a minute, cover it up, keep going. I am gonna add about another cup of liquid coming up towards the end. All right, so we got about another 4 minutes. This is right on time because I want all the liquid pretty much absorbed. All right, the pan's pretty dry. Nothing's burnt on the bottom. Fantastic. I'm just gonna stir this for a little bit. Add 1 cup hot water. I'm gonna add the corn milk and remaining bit of corn, some Parmesan, and a little bit of butter to finish. I got my water, I got my milked corn stuff, I got the rest of my corn here. I'm gonna add a good amount of grated parm here, maybe a 1/4 cup to a 1/2 cup, depending on how potent it is. Increase the heat, medium low, and I'm just gonna stir this. This is how we make the risotto. You gotta stir it 3 minutes. You saved all that time cooking it before without stirring it. Well, guess what? It all added up into one marathon stir. We got to get the starches off that rice and kind of gel it up, make it saucy. 3 minutes stirring. This is what we're doing. All right, gonna taste it for the salt level here. One more minute of stirring. Keep working it. We got a really good consistency here. I'm only gonna add a little bit of butter. I gotta add a little bit of salt here too. I'm gonna put in probably, start with a 1/4 if it needs salt. Teaspoon, start with a 1/4 teaspoon, go up to a 1/2 teaspoon. See how it's starting to get creamier here? Perfect, that's what we want. Fighting to stay up but losing, falling off the spoon. We're gonna take it off the heat. We gotta let it sit for about a few minutes, let's say 2 to 5, and then we can adjust the consistency as needed with additional hot water. All right, our risotto has sat for a few minutes. Now is the time to season it to taste. Add salt as needed. If you want a little looser, it's a little bit too tight, add a little bit of water. A couple tablespoons at a time, stir it in, upwards of 1/2 cup. You probably won't need that. This seems like a pretty good consistency to me. Also, as it cools, it will tighten up a little bit. So it's okay to have it a little looser than you might want. I'm just gonna put in maybe 2 tablespoons here. Let's plate it and taste it. This is my favorite part. Now for the salmon, this is going to serve two. I'm going to cut it in half, and I'm not going to bring the skin with it. All right, I'm just going to slide it underneath the skin, cook perfectly here. Here we go. We got our tomato relish. I'm using a slotted spoon here. You can add a little olive oil to this too if you need a little bit of richness. Let's dig in. I'm just going to start a little bit of the salmon, just straight up salmon. Oh my gosh. You just get hit with that fatty salmon, and then you get a little bit of sweetness, and boy, big salmon flavor. Touch of smokiness. It's not overwhelming. Tomato and corn, it's a match made in heaven. I love it. Creamy risotto. You get a little bit of that quintessential risotto flavor. It is the flavor of the rice, but then it's just accompanied by this corn, and that's why we staggered the corn when we added it. So you get this really depth of flavor from the corn kernels that were still in there, and that corn milk and the corn cobs. We added some towards the end of cooking, and they didn't really have a chance to break down or anything. And so you get a nice fresh pop of corn. So it's like levels of corn flavor. I think the tomato basil salsa kind of makes it, because you got rich salmon, rich risotto, a little bit of sweetness. You need that tart. So I put a tablespoon of balsamic in. I might even go up a little bit just to kind of make it pop. So good. Well, that was corn risotto with a smoky salmon and a tomato relish. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. Don't forget to follow me on Twitch and YouTube. I'm also on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope to see you next time. Take care.